Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's episode 209 of the Audible Farm podcast, and this episode is brought to you by Couchtown Coffee. I love Couchtown Coffee. I drink it all the time. A couple years ago, I was looking for sponsors. I put out a feeler. I said, who makes coffee? Who roasts coffee? Couchtown Coffee, somebody pointed me in their direction. I reached out, found out it's roasted by a musician right here in Iowa. And so I ordered some, and it was amazing. And we made a little partnership here. And it's been one of my favorite coffees I've ever had. I drink it every morning. I've been drinking it for years. You should check it out. Go to couchtowncoffee.com, find a coffee you like, make an order. And when you do, just let them know Audible Farm sent you, and they'll give you 20% off. Why? Because Couchtown Coffee is that awesome. Thanks, Couchtown. This episode is also brought to you by the patrons on the Patreon channel, helping us out each and every month. $1 per month, you can become a patron of the Patreon channel and watch video versions of the podcast with fellow patrons such as Eric and Vince and Ronley and Andy and Abby and Matt and Harold and Justin. And the McAllister Hours podcast is actually a patron of the Audible Farm podcast. That's pretty cool. So hats off to you guys over at the McAllister Hours podcast. So if you guys want to become a patron, just go to patreon.com/audiblefarm. It costs $1 a month or more. You can give as much as you'd like, but $1 a month will get you video versions of the podcast. That's $12 a year. And thank you very much to all of our patrons over at patreon.com/audiblefarm. This episode, I'm sitting down, I'm talking with Kenneth Fox. Kenneth was somebody that knew somebody that I knew and listened to the podcast and just reached out and was like, hey, I do this kind of stuff. What's going on? And I was just like, oh, this sounds like an interesting person. I think you should be on the podcast. That's what's going on. And we talked a little bit, and away we go. Now we're on the podcast. Kenneth is a luthier. He's been woodworking and playing music for quite a while. Been playing music in some fashion or another in a live capacity since he was about 12, maybe 13, somewhere in that area. It's crazy to think somebody at 12 is out playing live shows. I mean, it's absolutely wild to me. And then, not only that, but, at like 16, you start fixing your own guitars and fixing other people's guitars and fixing other equipment. And it's like, what? And then we go through and we talk about all, it's just wild. We go through and talk about all that kind of stuff. We talk about becoming a luthier and building guitars, which is also just something mind-blowing to me. Fixing a guitar, it's not as bad because there's parts and you can buy new parts if you break a part, and for the most part, as long as you don't snap the neck in half, you can fix anything. But building a guitar, that's some wild stuff. So yeah, we talk about that as well as playing music. He's a multi-instrumentalist. He does some other music stuff as well as some stuff going on in his life. It's just, he's got a fun story. He's been on a good adventure. Even as of late, he's setting everything back up to go back in business as a luthier here in Iowa. And we're here to talk about it. It's a fun story. So I hope you guys sit down and enjoy this one. And I sit down and talk with Kenneth Fox.
It's the Audible Farm Podcast with your host, Peter Stockdale.
Okay. I'm sitting down today talking with, I guess I didn't ask, Kenny or Kenneth?
Most people call me Kenny, but it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. All right. Kenneth Fox. I'm sitting down talking with Kenneth Fox today. You messaged me on Instagram, I believe, and said that you've been listening to the podcast here and there. You talked to Vinny from Vinny and the Night Prowlers, good old Vince Benishek. It's like you can't go anywhere in the state without finding someone that knows him.
Right.
Yeah. It's hard to, I don't know. The kid's just everywhere. He talks to everybody. He's a fun-loving guy. It's hard not to get along with him. So that's kind of fun. Small world out there. But yeah, you contacted me and you had some interesting stuff. I was like, well, tell me a little bit about yourself. And you said you grew up in Iowa, you moved away, you came back, you started playing music when you were really young, living in Iowa. Yeah, you got into woodworking, fixing guitars, playing guitars with multiple bands. A lot to unpack. So let's start all the way back at the beginning, and let's find out what got you started on this journey. Were you playing guitars first, or what was it?
So I was 6 years old. Dad got me a guitar, and he had been playing for about 45 years at the time.
Okay.
So I sat down, listened to him. He gave me a lesson here and there. And by the time I was 12 years old, I started playing in bars and wedding gigs and stuff like that. And as time went on, I, turned 15, 16, started doing my own work on my instruments, and started spreading out the word that I was going to do that. And people started bringing me their stuff, but it just wasn't enough to cut it. So I started working at factories and stuff like that. Well, I found out in my early 20s that is not what I want to do. So I decided to take everything I had and throw it into my business and got that started up again. And so I've been doing that for the last, 10, 12 years.
Nice. So you got started playing in bars and things like that at the age of like 12. That's wild.
Yes, sir.
How'd you get invited to do that? Were you tagging along with somebody else, or was somebody giving you at 12 years old solo gigs to play for weddings and things?
So my brother was getting married, and we were playing this little bar over in Illinois called The Barn. And his wedding reception was there. And me being 12 years old, my brother knew that I could play. He said, go ahead and let him up on stage. It'll be all right. So I played on stage, and instantly I had probably 3 or 4 people coming up to me, hey, would you like to play here? Would you like to play there? And my brother's band, he went ahead and invited me to play at the bars he was playing at in Cedar Rapids and Lisbon and Mechanicsville, that area. So ever since then, I just kind of, make $50 here, $100 here, playing out on the weekends, 12, 13 years old. And then my brother had his own construction business, so on the weekends, or even, during the summertime, I go stay with him for a week. We'd work construction all week, and then on the weekends, we would go ahead and go play some gigs and make money doing that too.
God, that's wild. That's wild to think of. Like, I was in a band with a kid who was 16, and it's the same deal. You're getting paid $100 here, $50 there, 150 here, whatever. Give or take, whatever, depending on the week. But like,
Right.
It's wild to think. It's like, man, he's 16-year-old kid getting just like, getting paid cash on the weekends every now and then here and there. Like, it's wild. And then it's to think that you were like 12 or 13 doing it. That buys a lot of candy, that buys a lot of baseball cards or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah, I'd go to school and say that, and the teachers would be like, you were where this weekend? Well, making money. Hey, man's gotta eat, That's wild. Well, I was blessed because, my dad seen that I was moving forward in the guitar world. So when I was 12 years old, he went out and bought me an American Fender Strat and a little, 112 Fender amplifier with a couple of effects on it. And I took that to the bars, and that's all I had to go on. That little amplifier and that guitar. But I'm still playing that today.
That's awesome. That is super cool, especially to have somebody, that believes in you that much, that's going to go out and invest in you.
Yeah.
I guess
he was hard sometimes, but he pushed me in the right direction. So
that's good. It comes up a lot on the podcast, having like a support group around you and things like that, especially when you're first starting out, to find the right people to kind of help you along the way and
Right.
things like that. And, I was lucky enough that my mom bought me my first guitar. As a matter of fact, she bought me my second guitar too, because my first one was like a beginner's guitar. So when I, finally started wearing that one out, it was like, all right, now that I know you'll play it, I'll buy you a nicer one,
Right.
So I love it. I absolutely love the fact that your dad did that for you and helped you out. And, your brother too, helping you out, letting you come along and gig with him and things like that.
Right.
It kind of goes against that trope, that stereotypical trope of just like, yeah, little brother, you go away from me, don't talk to me, Like it's
Right.
There's none of that going on. That's really cool.
No, more like, I'm going to step down off the stage and let my little brother play, and they're like, dude, he's 12, 13 years old. Just watch. Yeah. So.
Dude, that's super cool. So from 12, 13 to like 16, you said you started fixing instruments around 15 or 16 years old. Was that out of necessity, or was that you just didn't want to spend your hard-earned money to pay someone else to fix it, or you were just curious and wanted to like open it up and see what's inside there, or what?
Well, you know how it is working gigs and going to school and whatever. I didn't have the money to pay a luthier to fix my stuff, so necessity, yes, but also a buddy of mine, when I was about 14 years old, brought me a little piece of crap Fender or something or another that's been sitting in the garage for 10 years. And he's like, you can have it. So I stripped it down, rewired it, put a new neck on it, this and that and the other. And that's kind of where it really started.
That's awesome. It's kind of weird because I feel like I'm like a novice when it comes to fixing guitars. It was all necessity for me and curiosity. Like I just didn't want to take it. You had to like either mail it somewhere or get in a car and drive somewhere and drop it off. And it's like, I don't want to go next town over and drop it off or whatever. So I just started doing that. And that was like the first thing I fixed up was just like $100 guitar I picked up off Craigslist, and it was like, well, there's only so many wires and parts in here. Right. Not to be crass about it, but if it's like, if someone in China in a factory can do this, I don't know why I couldn't figure out how to solder. I should be able to figure it out. So it's, it's weird when it's like kind of partially necessity and then you start to figure some stuff out and you're like, I could do this instead on the inside, There's a lot of things that you can, MacGyver will just say, but I worked at Guitar Center for a year and they had these guitars in there that had the microchips attached to the potentiometer. And so something like that you cannot work on. And so I was trying to get a hold of people to have new parts shipped, and they're like, yeah, they're sitting on a boat somewhere in the ocean, been there for about 3 months, don't expect them anytime soon. And so this dude bought a $3,000 bass, and they didn't have a replacement one. And he brings it to me and he's like, it's not working. So I strip it apart, look at it. It's got the microchips in there. Come to find out, I can't get the replacement part. And I tell him, I'm like, I'm sorry, sir, but we don't have the replacement guitar right now. You can wait until they get one in the store. And he basically looked at me and said, it's firewood, just keep it. And I'm like, oh, man. Yeah, oh, gosh.
I felt really bad for him. But, yeah, putting all the extra stuff that they're putting in it today and the amplifiers, I won't even work on them anymore because there's so much stuff in there that you have to wait for parts from China, and then right now you can't get them.
That's true. Yeah, I especially know what you're talking about with like the inside of guitars. You open up an old guitar, it's just like a couple metal parts with some wires strung between it. Looks pretty good, but like for a while Gibson got in a lot of hot water over putting PCBs in the cavities.
Yeah, I don't remember the whole story on that, but I do remember them getting in trouble a couple times throughout the years. I mean, just recently.
Yeah, I mean, they did goofy stuff like auto tuners and things like that, but they also had like for a while they wanted to do like a quick swap was the whole deal, where they could just like, if you want a new pickup in, you just unplug it, take it out, you get a new one, you string it in there, plug it right back in, and it's ready to go. But it didn't always work as well as you thought it did. Like the pickups had these like awkwardly large plastic plug-ins on the end that wouldn't fit back through, so you had to take the plug-in off and then like take it out and then rewire a new wires through the original. It was just a big pain in the butt. So none of it was really as good as it could have been. I know a lot of people that had those guitars that were just like gut all the PCBs, put old stuff in it, call it good, which 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I guess if it works, it works, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so that's, that is what it is. Have you ever done any like woodworking? I know you mentioned doing a little bit of woodworking. Like, how does that factor into fixing a guitar for you? Because I'm not much of a woodworker, so like electronics, no problem. Woodworking, maybe, So like, how do you...
it could be something as simple as, sanding down a neck or sanding down the fretboard to put in new frets, but sometimes the woodworking involves routing out room for, like, if somebody has a single coil and they want to put in a humbucker. Well, you're taking this super expensive instrument, taking the original pickups out and routing it, and for a lot of woodworking goes into that, because you got to be exactly precise.
Yeah.
Because if you chip it or anything, or you can't go back once it takes so much off, so you might have a gaping hole there and it's going to look all goofy. And
oh my gosh, so this is perfect. So for like people that don't understand like the concept of single coils and humbuckers, like basically like look at a guitar. You got your Jimi Hendrix guitar, they got these little thin like one rail thick they're about as big as a finger
Right.
pickups. But then if you go look at like your Jimmy Page Les Paul type guitars, they've got the humbucker, which is like two of those stuck together. So imagine you got a guitar with just one of those little like strands of pickups in it, and you want to put one that's twice as wide in there. If you peel everything back, the hole's only big enough for one of those usually. So you have to like carve the wood out of the guitar to make it big enough to fit another piece in there, which is
Right.
like you said, once you start cutting wood out of a guitar, you can't add it back in.
No, I mean, it's incredibly difficult to do.
Yeah.
So.
And I mean, I've seen people do the filler thing, but even then, if you're carving out a hole that big, it's not something you could just slap some wood filler in there and be like, well, it's
Right.
good,
Or, they might have a single coil one pickup guitar and they want to add two humbuckers to non-existent holes. And they gotta measure and cut and be precise to make sure the magnets are going to line up with the string,
Yeah.
So
That's pretty much where I'm just like,
you're off by a 30-second, it's going to look goofy.
Exactly. And that's the stuff where it's like, I want to say I could do this, but I'm not doing this. If somebody came to me with that stuff, I'd be like, go take it somewhere else. You pay them more money, you'll get a better result. That's just the way it's going to work.
I had a shop in Muscatine when I first started out in my early 20s, and this guy brought me a $10,000 Martin. He had the certification in the case, the ticket from Martin, the receipt, everything. And he's like, I want a complete setup on it and this and that and the other. And I'm sitting there going, oof, okay. So I took my time for probably 3 days and, filed the nut, sanded down the saddle, adjusted the bridge. Yeah. Sometimes it does get nerve-wracking. Somebody brings you something like that.
Yeah, oh my gosh. That's like I was just thinking, just personally, I've never worked on a guitar that expensive. Like the most expensive guitar I've worked on is probably like $1,000 electric, which then even then if you're not cutting any wood out of it, it's not a huge deal. But like
Right.
when you're talking acoustics even, it's like that's most of the stuff where it's like, will you set up this acoustic? No, I won't. I'm sorry. It's difficult. It's not an easy task. It takes a lot more work. That's another one of those, if you're off by a little bit, like it's like, well, just ruin the nut. Like need a new one.
You got to replace it and start from scratch. Yep.
Which is horrible. I did that one time on a bridge for a guy that I was like, I'll fix the bridge on this. It's wonky. Sanded it down too much. It's basically wrecked.
Right.
So go get a new one. Then you got to file down a new one, and it's like, oh, this is more work than it would have been if I just did it right in the first place.
You got to take the heat gun and the scrapers and get the old bridge off. Take the glue off. Put the new one on.
No.
Clamp it 24 hours, start from scratch. Yep.
No, thank you. Okay, so if anybody's looking for acoustic work, take it to Kenny. Don't take it to me. He's the man. So it's so, you have to be so delicate, so careful. And I get it. It's one thing if you're working on your own instrument, but like, what was it like the first time somebody brought you one of their instruments and was like, hey, this is my baby, fix it?
Well, actually, my nephew, Josh Fox, brought me his Fender. I believe he told me it was his very first acoustic. And I had to refret it, put a new bridge on it, put new keys on it. I mean, I did the whole works. And, that being a sentimental instrument to him, if I would have done anything wrong with crack or what have you, then it would have been a whole mess. But that was probably the first time somebody brought me something that was really sentimental that I worked on.
Ooh, that's a rough one too, because you're like, this is so and so's baby. This is I gotta do right. I gotta make sure this thing gets fixed correctly, and you really have to take your time.
Well, I'm not trying to be whatever, but that's one of the problems I had working for other people. Is they were like, get the instrument in, get it out the door, get paid. No. I'm going to take my time and do it right. And if there's something wrong, I'm going to tell the customer, hey, this ain't right. I rather can't fix it, or this is what we need to do. A lot of times people are like, put some duct tape on it and send it out the door. Well, that's another reason why I want to work for myself, because I know the quality and integrity is going to be there.
Oh my gosh. It just makes me laugh when you think about, like, I've fixed the electronics on guitars, and it's so funny to open up the electronics plate in the back, and you're just like, There's too much electrical tape in here. Like, you're just like, what is going on?
Somebody was splicing and dicing. And,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
it's fun too because like I've seen, I saw one guitar that needed fixed up that didn't even have any solder on the inside of it. It was all just like tied together, like all the wires were literally like surgically tied to everything. Like, wow, somebody like went like you could have learned how to solder and soldered it up in less time than it would have taken to tie wires together. But I don't know. Yeah, it is what it is. It's pretty wild to think about that too, because like you said, you go work for somebody else and it might be a little different story. And I'm not going to incriminate, Guitar Center, because I know people that work for Guitar Center and they do great jobs,
Right.
But
Right.
but like it's just a thing when you work for somebody else. It almost doesn't matter what it is. They're looking for production out of their workers, and you're the worker, so you got to kind of just. In the door, out the door. It's like, well, who's this for? Don't worry about it. Just fix it and get it out the other side, and that's a tough thing, It's not like, at your own shop, you're just like caressing the guitars and like playing music to them and like, holding them like babies and stuff like that. But maybe you are. I don't know. You take a lot of care and pride when your name is the one that's on the door, though. That's
Exactly.
How young were you when you opened your first shop?
I really got to think about that. I want to say 20.
Jeez. That's
or
wild.
21, somewhere in there.
That's crazy.
But for the majority of the time, I was rather doing it out of my house or on my property. I had a cabin that I built, that I ordered, and build it up to be a guitar luthier place. So that's mainly what I was doing my business out of. But in Muscatine, I did have a building for about a year. But like I said, in a small town, the overhead and everything, it's better to probably do it out of your house. You know?
Yeah. I mean, especially now, like property taxes are insane, insurance is insane, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, anybody that's a homeowner, you understand. It's the way it works. It's just things are going a little nuts right now, especially in today's climate. It'd be really tough to like start a business up and make it, viable. So,
Right.
Especially when it comes down to like fixing guitars, like it seems like that would be something that's like an odd demand. It's back in the day, it used to be a thing that a town of 30,000 could have 2 guitar shops and they could both function easily, or 3 guitar shops. But nowadays, it's like one in a town that big is plenty for the whole county and surrounding counties. There's not terribly many, so there's a lot of people that are doing the whole in-home guitar shop kind of deal. And I once again, I don't blame them. It's a little bit easier, but it's kind of cool that you like ordered a shed and set a shed up for yourself to get it all.
Yeah.
It's like one of those tiny home type deals. Is that what it was?
Yep. Exactly. Had a nice little porch on the front. Sit out there and drink my coffee. Oh yeah.
That's legit. That's super cool. New idea. Hey, I guess you still would have to pay like, probably, I don't know. It depends on how it's wired up and whatever. I'm not going to get into the taxation on it and all that nonsense. So when you started doing luthier work, did you ever go to like a luthier school? Did you ever like, I guess, I don't know, is there a benefit to going to a school if you already kind of know how to do everything? Or like I talked to one guy and he just like got a book and he's like, I read a book and it taught me everything I needed to know.
I've never read a book on it necessarily. I mean, most of mine, honestly, was buying cheap instruments and doing trial and error. If I had something that I've never done before, I would go pay $80 for a cheap acoustic or electric, tear it all apart, and do to that instrument what I needed to do to my customer's instrument, just to save the hassle, make sure, basically do a dry run.
Mm-hmm.
I mean... I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No, it's all good. No, I totally understand that too. Because I mean, that was like, if somebody wanted me to fix something on whatever, I always kind of found it like, is this something I can do on my own? Have I done it before? Is it something I'm going to need to try before? Especially with like, I've refinished a few guitars and like repainted a few, and it's always like you got to have a spare block of wood to like test out the painting on this first before you go to the other one. And it comes in handy. I learned that the hard way because the first guitar I ever refinished, I like painted the headstock and the paint didn't dry and the paint just like was just slopping all over the place. It was horrible, and I don't know. I had to double back and try it again. But it's you got to try on something else. You can't just like do your trial and error on your $10,000 Martin that comes in. Just be like, let's just try refretting this. It shouldn't be too bad.
Well, I would order those do-it-yourself guitar kits.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've built anything from double neck to 7-string, whatever.
Cool.
Gibson style, Fender style. I used to hydro dip them. And I have a couple at home that I've done that I've kept. My first couple that turned out really good, and I've sold a few. That is really fun to do, but it's too much work.
It's a lot of work.
Yep.
The
time you're done glossing it and sanding it and making it look pretty and installing the neck and getting everything ready, it's like, man, I got anywhere from 20 to 40 hours into this, depending what you're doing.
Yeah, definitely.
I have a home that has the Tree of Life Steve Vai neck that has the LED lights in it, and
mm-hmm.
I installed all that. That was fun.
Yeah, that's wild. It's crazy you say hydro dipping. I've done a fair share of that as well. I don't know. I did one for me and Vinny met at Iowa Central, a community college, and I did one for them and donated it to the school. And I've done one for an event that's in my hometown that's like a music festival. I donated one to that for them to auction off, and I've done a few for those types of things because it's, like you said, it's a lot of work. And when people ask you to do one for them, it's like I mean, I can, but it's an investment. You gotta get all the paints, get all the colors, and get everything set up, and hydro dipping. If you want to do it quote unquote the correct way, you got to make sure the water's the right temperature, and
this amount of borax and this and the other. Yep.
Yeah, it's definitely not just as easy as some people think, but it is fun. The finished product is amazing, and I don't know. I like doing it. It's really fun, but like you said, it's so labor intensive and stuff. I haven't done one in a while. For a while, I got on a kick. I think I did 5 or 6 of them, and then I was just bah.
Yeah,
I'm kind of done with this.
It's probably been 4 or 5 years since I've done something like that, just because number one, I ain't had the time, and again, too labor intensive.
Yeah, you're gonna have to send me a couple pictures. We'll trade some pictures on what we got, because I'm intrigued, and I don't know. I think you'll kind of enjoy some of the stuff I got. I made videos for them and stuff because they were so labor intensive. It's well, if I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna take pictures and show the transformation and what I did. But yeah,
right.
We'll have to get together after this and kind of talk about some of that stuff. But yeah. So, I mean, it's crazy because, you never went to a luthier school or anything like that. You just kind of did it all trial and error, woodworking from a younger age, kind of. Was that something that you did, or was all your woodworking from a guitar's standpoint?
So, again, when I was 12, 13, I would go work construction with my brother during the week in the summertime, and then we'd gig on the weekends. So when he's working construction, when he had the time, he would slow down and show me how to cut this, how to do this, so I learned a lot of skill from him. And then, of course, my dad was a woodworker all of his life, ever since he was a boy. So I watched him. He had all the tools. I was blessed because out in the shed, he had all the tools that I needed. So I'd go out there and grab what I needed and go to work.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking 2 different kinds of woodworking too, because doing construction stuff, that's one kind of woodworking, but the other end would be what I would call maybe finishing work. It's stuff that's all that the super high detail stuff. It's not you're just sawing a 2x4 and then just slapping it in here, nailing it in here. You actually have to sit down and hyper measure things, and you get these little tiny tools to take tiny bits of stuff out. And my grandpa did a lot of that woodworking, and I kind of wished I would have taken more of it up. My uncle did a lot of it as well, and he actually was in the process of building a guitar before he passed away. So he's got a 3/4 finished guitar at his house. He's built from reading a book, and it's that's the kind of woodworking I wish I knew how to do, because mine's pretty basic, and I'm just not the best at it. I don't have a lot of experience with it, unfortunately, but that's the kind of high detail work. Those are the kind of people you need to sit down and learn from, and to get good at this kind of stuff, because like I said, this isn't just as simple as I got a 2x4 here, we'll just slap it onto this thing with a couple screws, and we'll cut it out with a saw, and it has this shape, and you just put a couple holes in it and whammo,
right.
Guitar. It's unfortunately not that easy.
No.
Have you ever built a guitar from scratch?
Yes. I built an electric and an acoustic from scratch, and I will build an acoustic or electric any day over an acoustic. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Just then just putting in the bracing all the way around and steaming the wood, and it's intense, and unless you have a big shop, absolutely set. I was MacGyvering things. I was taking a steel pipe, putting it in boiling water, sticking the wood in there until it was getting steamed enough where I could actually make it malleable to bend and stretch.
That's wild.
Forever.
I bet.
I've busted more pieces than I have probably put together trying to build an acoustic, just because I wasn't set up for it correctly,
Yeah, dude, the bracing on the inside is crazy, because it's like, if nobody's ever looked, if you're listening to this and you've never looked inside an acoustic, grab your phone, snap a picture inside your acoustic, look at the bracing. It's literally like a strip of wood with all these little wedges cut out, and like you said, you heat it up and with steam until it's like malleable, and you literally are like bending it around the shape of the guitar. It's like curving all around. You
literally have to take hundreds of wooden dowels and stick them in. Well, at the time I was using cardboard and plywood because that's all I had. But taking wooden dowels and sticking them down in there, and then you take the wood and put it around the wooden dowels, and then you got to pin the wood down to make it stay there, and when it dries, it'll form to that shape.
Oh.
If you do it correctly.
Yeah, you just explained that. It's like, I guess you can't glue down wet wood, so it didn't even like occur to me that you had to let it dry in that shape. It's so mind-blowing. Yeah, I wouldn't want anything to do with that. I mean, when you were saying you'd rather build an electric guitar, because I was thinking, I wouldn't mind trying to build an electric guitar from scratch, but the neck, it would be so much work to make a guitar neck and make it perfect.
So the guitar neck is hard to do. At the same time, the hardest thing about building a guitar neck is putting in the truss rod, routing out the truss rod and getting the fretboard glued onto the neck properly, and then sanding it all down to make it match. And if you're going to have binding and that type of thing adds in to your detail of work. But a lot of the times, I mean, I have seen acoustic guitars with bolt-on necks, but electrics are mainly bolt-on necks. So you build your neck, sometimes it's 3 pieces, 2 pieces, depending on what you're using or how you want to put it together. And then you bolt it onto the body, and it's not that easy, but in essence, you cut your hole, fit your neck, and bolt it on, you're done. Whereas an acoustic, you have to be so precise with a dovetail. And if you have to use shims or anything like that, eventually over the years, the wear from the strings pulling on the bridge and the neck is going to take that out of alignment. So you're going to have to reset it anyway. So if you don't do it right the first time, and cutting out a dovetail and trying to make a neck squeeze into an acoustic body and gluing it properly in a jig is very time consuming.
So I knew a guitar that had gotten broken. Let's just say it was broken. It's a nice way to say that it ended up in 2 pieces. And it was an acoustic guitar, and that was like my first experience with like somebody was like, do whatever you want with it, it's garbage. And I was like, I'm putting it back together. It's not going to be perfect, it's not going to be great, but I'm just going to put it back together. It had all these holes in it and missing pieces. I'll have to send you a picture of that one too. You'll be like, what the heck is this guy doing? But it was basically a free guitar. And when I realized how like acoustic guitar necks were set to the bodies, I was just like, oh, this isn't just like flat glued to the body. It's like you said, it's got a little dovetail thing. It's a slot that the thing just like slides into, and it locks to the guitar. And like you said, getting it set in there correctly. And unfortunately with this one, the dovetail was kind of out of whack because of the way it fell into 2 pieces. Let's just say that. So they didn't quite line up perfectly, so I had to kind of shim it together and brace it. But yeah, we're talking guitar necks here. It sounds like a pain in the butt, right? Like I would rather make a guitar neck than make an acoustic body, though. We're coming right back to that.
Oh yeah.
Like, we literally just spent 5 minutes talking about how inconvenient a neck was, and now the acoustic body, it still comes back to that's still way more difficult. Sorry I interrupted you. What were you going to say?
I'm working on building a guitar right now, but until I'm absolutely set up, because I'm in the middle of moving and everything, I ain't got my jig set up in that. I got a piece of 5A flame maple for the guitar body for an electric.
Nice.
And it's going to be a big body Telecaster.
Cool.
And then the 5A flame maple or flame walnut that I'm going to use for the guitar neck.
Cool.
I'm looking forward to get that done here in the next probably year with everything going on. Work on it here, work on it there, leave it in the jig. But I'm hoping that'll be really nice when I'm done with it. And it's probably going to be a keeper. It's probably going to be one that I keep and play for gigs and stuff like that.
Is that going to be a maple top or like a maple cap on the guitar? Or is the whole thing going to be the flame maple?
It's one piece. I cut it. I actually took it to a buddy of mine that works at the sawmill and had him cut it out because it was just eating my blades like crazy.
Oh, that's wild.
So I took it to him and had him put it in an industrial jig, and he cut the shape for me because I was just eating through blades.
That's wild. That's super wild. What was the neck wood on that one again?
5A flamed walnut, which just means it's like very pretty. It's got a lot of detail in the wood, 1A, 2A, so on and so forth. So it's just very detailed.
I've begun to see the necks on guitars. It used to just be like maple. It's always maple, only ever maple. You're never going to find one that's not maple. And now, cheaper guitars have some mahogany sometimes in the neck or whatever. But like now it's like, I've seen like solid rosewood necks and just like people, there's there's no rules now. What the heck happened in the last 10 years that made people start going away from maple?
I have no idea. Maple is a great wood. I mean, I've liked rosewood.
Yeah.
I've had rosewood on Strats and I've had maple on Strats and vice versa on PRSs and Gibsons and whatever. I like them both. I can't really, they say that rosewood has a little bit of that darker tone, which I think that's true. It's got a little bit of a darker tone, but everybody's ear is different.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those things where I've gone back and forth trying to decide whether or not those like tone wood arguments matter very much with electric guitars, and they do to an extent. It's not like so aggressive that people, like the average person, can hear it or will care about it. But like if you're playing the instrument, you've put hours and hours and hours into playing instruments, you'll be able to figure out that they sound slightly differently with like the different woods in them. And I don't know if like the whole everyone's guitar tone is going this direction or like these tone woods, Fender were making weird necked amps or weird neck guitars because they fit our goofy amps we're making, or like I don't know if they're trying to do like some sort of partnering with their own stuff to see like these things kind of mesh together well, or if they were just we had leftover rosewood, we're making rosewood necks, who cares, or we didn't have enough maple to make maple necks and we're gonna make these instead. Or you fall into the Gibson thing where some people come in and look at your factory and they say you don't have the correct paperwork for this wood, we're taking it, sorry, which happened to Gibson probably 10 years ago or whatever it was, but 10 years ago. But and that's a rough thing too to think about, like with these mass-produced guitars, you kind of run into those things too, where like I'm assuming if you're building a guitar, like you said, with your piece of maple that's super nice, like you're probably looking out like this would be the best spot to cut the body out, like at this angle because of the way it's shaped and things like that. Whereas if you go to like a factory where they're doing that, they're just like, whatever, random piece of maple, here's the shape of the body, slam it out, next one, and they just go through it.
Exactly.
There might be like a knot in it, or like the grains in it don't quite line up correctly going one direction or something, or
yep,
might be a weak piece of wood or something. So I think that's probably like the biggest difference between like a nice, quote unquote, nice guitar and one of the cheapies that you and I kind of are, we tested our abilities on,
Well, the argument that I have discussion that I have with a lot of people is, I've seen people come in to Guitar Center or wherever and buy a $3,000 instrument because they think it makes that much difference. And I would say, okay, listen, if you go into the studio, especially if you have a pedal board that's got 20 different pedals on it, if you go into the studio between your pedal board and between effects in the studio, if I grab a $300 or $400 Squire Telecaster, or you go get an American Tele that's $2,000, if you turn your back to me, you're not going to know which one I'm playing.
That's true.
And there have been people that argue with me and say, "Oh yes, I can tell the difference." Well, again, that's all in your ear. I've had tons of people come up to me and say, which one of these sound better? What's the material in them? This and that and the other. And I always tell people, man, pick it up and play it. And if it feels good, it's right.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about all the details that you want. This is American, this is Mexican, this is whatever. It really comes down to the player and everybody's ears.
Yeah, totally. Trust me, I get it. Like I live in a small town. I go to a lot of jam nights and things like that. There's a lot of people that turn their nose up at Mexican-made instruments and Chinese-made instruments, and it's got to be American-made. That's the best, and all this other stuff. And people argue about the wood and all the difference in the wood, and it does make a little bit of a difference. But like you said, if you're going into a studio and you have somebody cranking the knobs on EQing everything and setting it up, and you're going through a pedal board and everything, like, they can make it sound exactly like an expensive one too, just with the EQ knobs and everything they're doing to it. Plus, like, one of the biggest arguments I have against tone woods on an electric guitar is, like, it's an electric guitar, like, it's going through the electronics to go out into an amp. Like, I would think the pickup would make more difference than the wood. And, like, I've seen people try to, like, make that argument, and, like, one of the funniest ones was I saw a video online where a guy, like, built a guitar that didn't have any wood in it, and it was basically like he set up a bench on either side of him that had one had a nut and one had a bridge, and he strung the strings across it, so it's like a guitar playing in the air with no frets, no nothing, and he started installing pickups under it. And he's just like, see, like, the different pickups make all the difference in how it sounds coming out of the amp. And
right.
Then he tried them, like, with guitars, and he's like, see, I can just go in the studio here and twist the knobs a little bit. Boom, everything sounds the same. So it really kind of doesn't matter. And it was like an eye-opening video for me to be like, oh, yeah, once people start twisting knobs. And you can even do that at your house with your own amps, too. Get a $1,000 guitar, get a $500 guitar, get a $100 guitar. They'll sound different, but once you start twisting the knobs, you can make them all sound the same.
Right, and let's say, the people have the argument of acoustics. Well, you can't do that with an acoustic. Okay, well, then that comes down to a setup, and again, your ear, because you may pick up a Martin that you absolutely love, and I may pick it up and be like, no, this thing does not play good. It does not sound good to me at all. So it's really hard pleasing customers sometimes, because they'll come to me and say, I want the action at this height, factory recommended. Well, you may get a guitar, since they're mass produced, you may get a guitar that is not going to set up to factory. No matter how hard you try, it is not going to set up to factory.
Yep.
I
the first time I ever ran into that, I was trying to set up a guitar. I'm like, how come this thing just isn't quite lining up? And, like, the issue ended up being I needed a slight shim in the neck, but it was still just like, how come it's not lining up? And it's like, oh, because it was mass produced, it's made in China, nothing against it, but it's just the way it worked.
Right.
This was one of 5,000 guitars somebody made that day or whatever. They cut the neck joist out of like 5,000 guitars. This is just one of them. It wasn't perfect, whatever. Right. But yeah, like, it's weird when you get to a guitar and you're like, I need to set this up this way because this is what feels best, and you realize, unfortunately for this guitar, for the playability of it, this is the way it has to be set up.
Well, funny little story. A friend of mine got a hold of me and said, hey, man, I need to go buy a new guitar. You want to go with me? I said, yeah, I'll help you pick one out. So I go with him, and we go into a store, and there's this ugly yellow classical guitar sitting there, and something told me to pick it up, and I picked it up and strummed it, and it was perfectly in tune. And it was $100. And it's a Luthier, which is, they have cheaper made guitars.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I bought it, and that was 5-6 years ago. And I'll walk into a gig, and people kind of giggle. They're like, that thing is ugly, and it was only $100. It can't sound good. Well, I put a bone nut on it, a bone saddle, set it up, and people were like, how are you getting that sound out of that cheap little guitar? I don't have no pedals. I don't have nothing. I plug right into my little Fender 112 amp, and that's it. Plug and play.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Sometimes the tiniest upgrades on some of those things can make all the difference. like I never really realized how big of a difference the nut on a guitar would make, whether it be electric or acoustic or whatever, until I had a guitar that had, I believe the nut was made out of nickel. I'm not 100% sure. I think it's nickel. It's I've seen brass nuts as well.
Right.
But yeah, that was like, I was like, holy cow, this thing is spanky as hell if it has a metal nut, you know, because it's metal on both ends, and you're like, oh, you're not losing any of the vibration.
So that's the argument I was trying to make with people is if you take an acoustic or electric and you just change small parts like that, you can change a $100 guitar into a $2,000 guitar with a small little transformation like that, you know?
Yeah. And basically the only thing you're missing, what's that?
Makes a world of difference.
Yeah. And at that point, basically the only thing you're missing out on is like a choicer piece of wood that may or may not have, you know, come from an American shop, you know, because they'll get all this awesome wood in. These are the nice ones. We're keeping it. Those ones are going to Mexico. These ones are going to that factory, whatever. So they'll do that, and they might end up taking like a cheaper something on one end or the other. Like they've got less expensive pickups or less expensive this, that, or the other. But like you said, if you have an Epiphone and, you know, an Epiphone Les Paul, you put new pickups in it, you put new hardware in it, boom, you've got a Gibson. It's that simple. And I mean, you can save yourself half the money. And it's just kind of the way it works out. And I think that's one of my favorite things about like kind of working on guitars is there's really no rules or there's no limits to anything you can or can't do. Like once you start realizing like, oh, I can swap out the pickups, or I can change the, I can change the capacitor that's, you know, inside of here and make it different. I can change like resistors or something, or add one in there and see what that does or whatever. High pass filters and low pass filters and all this other nonsense like that. But, and I mean, that's like a lot of like guitar geeky kind of stuff that I feel like not everyone is into. Some people just want to play the guitar, but you know, and I mean, the benefit of that is those are the people that come to you and they're just like, hey, just fix it. I just need to play it next week, you know?
Yep.
I mean, I love those people too. They're spending all the time playing music, and they're usually the better musicians anyways, because we're so distracted by ended up playing like, you know, I got to try to fix stuff. However, did you mention you played like a bunch of different instruments? Like I know Vinny said you played different instruments. Like how many instruments do you play?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure, but mandolin, banjo, guitar, lap steel.
Cool.
The old Hank style pedal steel. I can't do the double necks or anything like that, but I can do the old Hank style pedal steel. Harmonica, bass. I mean, pretty much anything with strings. I can play a little bit on piano, not much.
That's so wild.
That wind instruments, just, you know, always had a guitar in my hands, so.
What was, so the first thing I'm assuming you picked up was a guitar.
Yep, I was 6 years old. Dad got me a little first act. It was junk, but I played it for a couple years, and Dad went and got me a Jasmine Takamine.
Nice.
I still have that, too. That's my first acoustic. So I was 8 years old when I got that, and then he seen I really got serious within the next couple years and bought me that electric when I was 12, and that's pretty much still my main guitarist today.
Cool. So after guitar, was it bass guitar, or did you go weird and you're like, I'm gonna learn the mandolin next?
One day Dad went to the guitar store, came home with a banjo, and he said, I'm gonna play this, because he played a little bit on the banjo. Well, when he got older and fingers quit working so well, he said, here you go, and handed it to me. But while I was in the house there, I was probably 13 or 14 when I started plucking on it.
Oh, crazy.
But I didn't start taking it serious until I was probably 17 or 18.
That's a wild one. Like, I remember the first time I sat down with a banjo, I'm like, you play this like a guitar, right? And then you're like, oh, wait, this isn't even anything close like a guitar. You get the different, like, finger roll patterns and all that other stuff going on.
Well, 5 strings, the highest string is on top in the middle of the neck. What?
Yeah, in the middle of the neck, too. Yeah, like, why is there a tuner halfway up the neck of this guitar just hanging out? Banjos are weird. And they do make those 6-string banjos, though, too, that are, like, tuned like
guitar tuned and kind of a cheater banjo. Yeah.
Yeah, which I guess whatever. It works. It's cool. Like I'd still like wish I could play a banjo. I sat down and like the thing that got me with banjo is I just could not get the finger rolls fast enough on the one hand. I bet if I practiced, I probably could, but it was just frustrating.
Luckily for me, I started out playing, Chet and stuff like that, so I already had the fingers. I just had to switch it over to banjo rolls.
Nice. So, I mean, that leads us into like your influences. So, I mean, it comes down to what you were influenced by. I was like a power chord punk rock guy, like, starting out. So that's immediately what I got into. It's just, that kind of stuff. But it sounds like you had a different route starting out in this, not necessarily being like the rock and roll with long hair and all that nonsense.
Well, my dad was much older when he had me. He was 53, so by the time I was 10 and started getting pretty decent at guitar, he was already 63. Mm-hmm. So it was old school living with him. Mm-hmm. He had the old record players. I'd get up 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, have a cup of coffee with me. He'd have Johnny Cash or whatever playing while we're sitting there drinking coffee. So it was just a constant listening to country music all the time. And then my brother, when I was about 11, 12, introduced me to Stevie Ray Vaughan. And then I just opened up into a whole new world, learning different things.
Yeah, SRV will do that to you. That's for damn sure.
Yeah. First time I heard SRV, I'm like, what is this? Because I was used to listening to just old finger style, and then you hear the blues for the first time, and you're like, wow.
Yeah. A lot of people turn their nose up at the blues, but holy moly. I still remember like getting into playing guitar and stuff and just being like, man, SRV's doing something. He's doing something different over there.
It's just his feeling.
Yeah.
Man. He puts all his feeling into his guitar, just like Jimmy. That's why they're so great.
Yeah, I remember hearing an interview with him once that he's like, I like to try to imagine to myself what the drums and bass would sound like if they were playing with me, even if they're not there. So what he would do is he'd like kind of come up with these songs. He's like, this is kind of how I want it to go. And he's known for being like ka-chong, 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 ka-chong.
Okay.
He's got those kind of, that beat kind of going in there. And what he was doing, he was add all those little bits, those little percussive bits to make it seem like, well, if we're doing a shuffle and the drums and bass are in here, they'd be doing something kind of like this alongside of me. So that's kind of why he did it that style anyways. And then when he had the drums and bass with him, he was just like, well, I'm just going to keep playing it like this because this is how, I'd prefer to play it anyways. But it's kind of cool that that's like a style that he kind of learned or had just based on necessity. And
right.
Oh no, we're running out of juice.
Uh-huh.
Oh man, we're getting close, but we do have a few other things to talk about. You moved away and you ended up coming back though. What made you come back? Was it just like family around the area, or was it time to come back, or was this just kind of the place that was calling home, or was everybody just like, you need to come back and fix my guitar, please?
Well, long story short, I met what is now my wife online and went out to North Carolina and stayed out there for a while. That's where I was working at Guitar Center and doing this and that and the other. We ended up getting married out there, and my mom lives out here, and she doesn't have much help, and she's getting older too. So I told the wife, got to go back to Iowa.
Yep.
So we ended up buying a house here, and now I'm back
doing the guitar thing here. That's awesome. How many shows do you play, like, since you've come back? Have you joined any bands? Have you done any studio work? Because I remember you said you did some studio work, and I also saw that on your website, by the way, too. I'm posting a link to your website down below, so everyone check that out. But have you done any of that since you've come back?
Not since I come back, because I've been back for 2 months, and the whole time has been packing boxes, getting the kids enrolled in school, and goodness, it's just been busy. Yeah,
I don't envy anybody that moves once, let alone like once a year for the last, you moved last year and you moved this year pretty much, right?
Right. And I mean, it's 1,000 miles. So I loaded up a 26-foot U-Haul and straight through nonstop.
You did that twice.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just so much work to move. I don't envy it, but I'm glad you're back in the state. I've never this is fun because I've never met you before, but it's kind of like we said at the beginning of this, small. It's music scene here is big, but it's small, and it's
Right.
I'm assuming that you and I have probably like run into people or know people that we've met before. Just like Vinny. I remember you'd mentioned you had a cousin named Josh Fox, and I know there's a musician in like the Des Moines area named Josh Fox. I don't know if that's the same person or not, but anyways, like it's kind of weird that it's like, oh, it could be the same person with the same name that might actually play music. It could be completely different people and they just have the same name, and they play right in the different areas. And I was going to ask you about that, but I don't know. The time has kind of passed, but
well, I've been wanting to get back into bands and do that type of thing. I haven't done any studio work in probably, I don't know, a couple years, unfortunately. But I would love to get back in the band and start playing again. But mainly right now, I'm just worried about working on my repair, getting that all set up, getting clientele.
So like luthier work and repair work is like, number one. I guess it is kind of like also your job or your supplemental income too. So it might be the thing,
right,
to get started up first. But, so that is number one on the docket then, is to get that all set up so you can start taking customers back in. All right. So where is the shop located at, I guess would be like the best thing to kind of go. If I think I saw on your website, you're kind of between Iowa City and the Quad Cities.
So I'm moving to Wilton, and I'll be right there on the main street at 118. That's where I'm going to have my shop at, 118 East 5th.
Nice. That was in Wilton?
Yes, sir.
And that was, am I correct? That's between like Iowa City and Quad Cities for those of us not in that area?
Yeah. Yes.
All right, cool. So I looked up the right place. I got it right. So I think I found that information like maybe on your website or something. But the website is going to have all the information. It's got ways to contact Kenny if you want to talk to him about guitars, get some guitars fixed, get some quotes, things like that. I did see you do have like, different packages and fees for different things, and like oddball stuff. You kind of got a call to figure out what's going on. And, just from sitting down talking with you for the last hour, you seem like a very down to earth person. And those are the kind of people that are, it's nice to, like I said, have someone like that fixing your guitar instead of somebody that's just production based, where you don't actually get to talk to them or see them, and
right.
The guitar works crazy because, like you said, it could be like we can fix it this way, or I can fix it this way, or I can just give it back to you and we can't fix it because these things I can't do, or what like you're going to tell people what the best options are, what other options they have available. Might have to wait because of the stupid shipping thing that's been going on.
Yeah, that's been the biggest problem. It's crazy. Sometimes, I think there's a dude waiting 9 months for one part.
Like at that point, I'd just be like, shove something else in there. Just
Yep. Yep.
I mean, you'll know these are the options you can give to people, so he'll be able to tell you that. So it's going to be the best way to do it. There's in the description section down below. Make sure to find the website, check it out. I think we talked about most of the stuff. We did kind of gloss over the influences. Have your influences changed? I just like this. Have your influences like really changed? I know you talked about like growing up listening to kind of some older country and things like that, and then kind of going into SRV. But have they changed as you've gotten older and your style changed a bunch as a guitar player?
I don't really think so. Finger picking's always going to be my forte and go-to. I love playing rock and metal and stuff like that, but if I'm going to go play gigs, it's most likely going to be country and sticking to my roots.
That's awesome. We need more finger picky people out there. There's so many people out there flat picking and doing all that stuff, just regular guitar playing. We need more finger pickers. We need more chicken picking. We need more all of that stuff. So hats off to you for doing all that stuff. That's wizardry. That's guitar wizardry. You're a wizard on all fronts on the guitar. You can fix all the crazy wood stuff. You can fix the electronic stuff. He can finger pick a guitar, do studio work. He'll join your band. Hit this man up, everybody. Is there anything we didn't talk about that you think you might want to squeeze back out of here? I'm trying to go back through my notes here. Mm-hmm.
I don't think so.
I will say one more time, the website said you did give lessons. So if anybody's looking for lessons in that area, that's where it's at. All right. Stick with me here. I am going to end the recording, but I do want to say thank you for joining me on the podcast. I really do appreciate that.
I appreciate you for having me.
Absolutely. What a small musical world it is to know that he knows Vinny and I know Vinny, but then again, who doesn't know Vinny? Vince Beneshek, fun guy. And I'll tell you what, sitting down talking with Kenny sounds like a fun guy as well. Fun story. The whole thing just kind of intrigues me. It seems like such a normal life, but at the same time, such a just slightly off to the left. I mean, like working on guitars, not that big a deal, but working on guitars when you're like 16, that's pretty wild, and playing live shows, in your early teens, that's pretty wild too. Late teens, not as wild. Early teens, pretty wild, So I think about that kind of stuff, and that's the kind of stuff that just blows me away, and gives his story just some form of originality that's just really, really intriguing. To know that he's a luthier and some of his process comes out in here, where like if he wants to try something that he's never tried before, he'll go out and try it on one of his own instruments before he ever tries it on someone else's, which is definitely a testament to how he's doing things over there. Because, I mean, you could just go test it on someone else's things and then bill him for it and stuff, but that's unethical. And, that just goes to show you the ethics that he's running around there. And so I appreciate him, coming out and talking about some of the struggles he had when he first started, becoming a luthier. It's like, man, I didn't know I had to do this on, $10,000 instruments just as much as I did on $100 instruments, depending on... It doesn't really matter if somebody brings it in, you still have to fix it. So you have to take just as much care of every single instrument, regardless of what comes through the door or who comes in with what. So it's really interesting to hear that, and not only that, but to hear he's got a unique guitar playing style, which is definitely not a style that there's too many people out there doing. There's a lot of people doing the power chord and the single, the guitar pick, flat picking, or whatever you want to call it, but there's a lot of people doing that kind of stuff, and not very many people doing the claw hammer, or the chicken picking, or the banjo style picking, and that kind of stuff. So finger picking along those lines. So it's really intriguing to have people out there like him doing what he's doing. So hats off to Kenneth, or Kenny, whatever he prefers to be called, Luthier Kenny. I got links down below for it, so check it out. Make sure you check out the website. The website will lead you everywhere you need to find anything that has to do with Kenny and what kind of guitar work he can do. Lessons, luthier work, studio work, you name it. He'll have a little bit of this, that, and the other, and everything available to you right there on the website. And it's a fun little website. It's nice. Everything's organized. It's right there. It's easy to find. Boom, there you go. So hats off once again. I want to say thanks to Kenny for taking time out of his day to sit down and talk with me about his work and like what he's done and things like that. Because like I said, he just kind of sent me a little bit of information about him. He's like, I listened to the podcast, I talked to this person, I know him, it's kind of fun, here's like my story. And I said, this is just really interesting. So I hope you guys enjoyed a little peek into his life, and to know that there's other luthiers out there. If you guys need luthier work, this is definitely an option, so check that out. So yeah, links are down below for that. There's also links down below for Audible Farm stuff, the Audible Farm shop, where you can find Audible Farm merch, such as the hoodies. Hoodies are back in stock. It's awesome. It's getting chilly out, so it's time for hoodie weather. And yeah, pick yourself up a hoodie. Last time a hoodie sold out, and it took me well over a year to get more back in stock. So if you're looking for a hoodie, check there for sizes and availability. And if you see me at shows and things, hit me up. Maybe I can just bring one to a show and we can avoid the shipping and fees and all that other nonsense. But otherwise, yeah, if you want me to ship one across the state, boom, that's the best place to find it, the Audible Farm shop. There's a link down below. There's also a link down below for the Patreon channel if you guys want to watch video versions of the podcast or support the podcast monetarily for $1 a month. As little as $1 a month, you can just watch video versions of the podcast over on the Patreon channel. It's really cool. Kind of see everybody, see what we look like, say hi to us, and that kind of stuff. So otherwise, all the other Audible Farm links are at audiblefarm.com. You can find links to the YouTube where you can subscribe and watch all the videos and all sorts of good stuff over there. There's also links to all the other social media: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Follow, like, subscribe, share wherever you frequent the social media, just to stay up to date with all the other Audible Farm good stuff. So thank you guys for listening, and I'm out of here. I'll check you next week. Peace.